It was a typical Friday evening at the park, with families scattered across the grass, enjoying the warmth of the fading sunlight. The air was cool, crisp, and calm, but an undercurrent of tension hung thick. A low hum of distant conversations mixed with the occasional laughter of children playing in the open fields. For most, it was a peaceful evening, but for one young girl, everything was about to change in an instant. Amara stood at the edge of the park, her figure partially hidden by the tall oak trees. She had been here for hours, watching people, her mind lost in thought. Her eyes flicked over the park-goers, but she didn't really see them. She hadn't been out for fun. She didn't come to enjoy the day like the others. She came to get away from the weight of the world, to find a brief escape from the never-ending struggles that had defined her life. Her parents had worked hard, but life had never been easy for them. They moved from place to place, never settling long enough to call anywhere home. Amara had learned to be self-sufficient at an early age. She understood the hard truths about the world, about how people judged her by the color of her skin, about how the world often expected less from her because of where she came from. But that never stopped her. She learned to keep her head down and survive. There was no room for weakness in her world. It was a harsh reality, but it was her reality. A sudden scream broke her from her thoughts, snapping her into focus. It came from the playground area. A child. A loud, blood-curdling scream of pain. Amara's heart raced, and without thinking, she sprinted toward the sound. The world blurred around her as her feet hit the pavement, carrying her faster and faster. She skidded around a corner, barely avoiding a group of kids running the other way. When she reached the playground, she saw a small boy, maybe no older than 6, lying on the ground. His face was twisted in agony, tears streaming down his cheeks. His leg was twisted in a way that should never be possible. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the gravel below. His cries echoed in the air, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything froze. The boy's mother stood a few feet away, frozen in panic, unable to move. Other people stood around, watching, but no one seemed to know what to do. Amara's heart raced as she quickly assessed the situation. She wasn't a medical expert, but she'd learned enough over the years. Her father, a former soldier, had always emphasized being prepared for anything. It was a mindset that had stayed with her, and right now, it was her only advantage. Without hesitation, she knelt beside the boy. "Hey, stay with me, okay?" she said, her voice calm but firm. "We're going to get you help." The boy's wide eyes locked onto hers. He didn't know her, but there was something in her eyes that seemed to comfort him. She wasn't a stranger to pain, she'd seen enough of it to recognize how to deal with it. She tore off her jacket and pressed it firmly against the boy's leg, trying to stop the bleeding. The fabric quickly darkened, but she didn't let go. "Hold on," she whispered, glancing around. "Someone call 911. Now." A man standing nearby fumbled with his phone, trying to dial the emergency services, his hands shaking. Amara turned her attention back to the boy, who was starting to lose consciousness. His breaths were shallow, his eyes fluttering. "No, no, no. Stay awake. Don't go to sleep," she muttered under her breath, trying to keep him conscious. "Keep looking at me, okay? Focus on me." The minutes felt like hours. She didn't care if people were watching or if they were judging her. She didn't care if they thought she was too young or didn't belong. Right now, the only thing that mattered was this child's life. It didn't matter who he was or who she was. All that mattered was that she had the chance to make a difference. Amara's heart skipped when she saw the flashing lights in the distance. The ambulance was on its way. She had done her part. She'd kept him alive long enough. She felt a strange sensation as she turned to look up at the crowd. There was something about the way they were staring at her, as if they saw something they didn't quite understand. Some of them were whispering to each other, pointing in her direction. She caught the eyes of a man standing near the back of the group. He was older, dressed in a crisp suit, looking completely out of place among the park-goers. His expression was intense, almost as if he recognized her, or at least knew something about her that no one else did. Amara quickly turned her attention back to the boy, but the man's gaze lingered. He watched her like a hawk, his eyes sharp and calculating. It was unsettling, but she didn't let it distract her. The paramedics arrived moments later, rushing to the boy's side. They quickly took over, but as they moved him onto the stretcher, Amara took a step back, ready to disappear into the crowd. Just as she turned to leave, a voice stopped her. "Hey!" Amara froze, her body tense. She didn't know why, but something about the voice sent a chill down her spine. She turned slowly to find the man who had been watching her. He was standing closer now, just a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "You did a good thing," he said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that couldn't be ignored. "You saved him." She nodded, not sure what else to say. She wasn't looking for praise. She wasn't looking for anything. The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "What's your name?" Amara hesitated. She had learned long ago that it was safer not to share too much about herself. But something about this man's presence made her uneasy. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't place. "I'm just someone who happened to be here," she said, keeping her voice neutral. The man didn't seem convinced. His gaze never wavered. "Someone who knows how to save a life." She swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. The boy had been taken to the hospital, and she should have been gone by now, blending into the night like she always did. But something about this encounter felt different. The man took another step forward. "You're not from around here, are you?" Amara's pulse quickened. She didn't like where this conversation was heading. She had to leave. Now. But before she could say another word, the man spoke again, his voice low and purposeful. "I think we need to talk. Your identity. It's something I need to know about." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the shadows, her heart racing. As she disappeared into the crowd, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed. Something big. And she had no idea what she had just stepped into. Amara didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small apartment, staring at the cracked screen of her phone, lost in thought. The events at the park had replayed in her mind over and over. The boy, his blood staining the ground, the cold, calculating gaze of the man in the suit. Everything felt wrong, like a puzzle she didn't know how to solve. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her trance. It was a text from her best friend, Layla. "You good? What happened at the park? I heard about the accident. Are you all right?" Amara stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keys. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't told Layla about the man. About the way he had watched her, studied her. She wasn't sure if she could explain it. She didn't even fully understand it herself. "I'm fine. The boy is fine too. Just a bit shaken up, I think. I'm fine." She sent the message and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. What was that man after? Why had he been so intent on speaking to her? She could feel his eyes even now, watching her from the shadows. He had seemed so familiar, like someone she should have recognized but couldn't place. The text tone pinged again. "You know, the news is buzzing about that whole thing. They're calling you a hero or something. Are you going to go on TV?" Amara snorted, shaking her head. "A hero?" she muttered under her breath. It wasn't about being a hero. She had just done what anyone would do, what anyone should do. She wasn't looking for attention. She never had been. Still, she felt a pang of unease. The thought of being in the spotlight, even in the smallest way, didn't sit well with her. There was something about being noticed that she didn't like, something that had always made her want to disappear. But now, she felt like she couldn't. Something about that man, his gaze, his words, it felt like he knew her in a way she couldn't understand. A knock at the door startled her. She jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. She got up slowly, cautiously, and peered through the peephole. There was no one there. Then, as she turned away, she heard a voice, soft but unmistakable. Amara. Her body went cold. The voice sounded like the man from the park, though she couldn't be sure. She hesitated, her heart pounding. She didn't open the door. Instead, she backed away from it, trying to steady her breathing. The voice came again. I know you're in there. I don't want to scare you. Please, let me explain. Her mind raced. Who was this man? What did he want with her? Why hadn't he just gone away? He must have found her address somehow, which sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She couldn't afford to be found. She couldn't afford for anyone to know too much about her. Amara moved toward the window, peering through the blinds. The street outside was quiet, the lights of the city stretching far into the distance. Nothing seemed out of place. But then she saw him. The man in the suit. He was standing at the far end of the street, under the glow of a street lamp, his hands in his pockets, looking up at her window. The same cold, calculating look on his face. He didn't seem like someone who had just been passing by. No, he was waiting. Waiting for her to make a choice. Amara's fingers tightened around the edge of the blinds. He hadn't seen her. At least, she hoped he hadn't. The last thing she wanted was for him to know she was watching him. But she couldn't ignore him. There was something about him that kept pulling at her, something that made her feel like he was connected to a larger story, one that she hadn't even begun to understand. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Layla. Girl, what's going on? I'm really worried about you. Amara didn't respond. She couldn't. Not with everything that was happening. She needed to make a decision, and she didn't know what to do. The man wasn't going to just go away. He wanted something from her, and she didn't know what it was. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that whatever was happening wasn't just about the boy at the park. It was about her, too. The way he had looked at her, the questions he had asked. He hadn't seemed surprised by what she had done. He had been searching for something. After what felt like an eternity, Amara finally made her decision. She grabbed her jacket, checked the locks on the door, and slipped out the back of her apartment. She had to find out what he wanted. It wasn't long before she found him again. She kept a safe distance as she followed him through the streets, trying to blend in with the crowd. He moved with purpose, his strides long and measured. Amara felt like a ghost, invisible in the shadows, but she wasn't sure if that was enough. Was he aware of her? Had he noticed her tailing him? Her heartbeat quickened as he turned a corner and walked down a narrow alley. Amara hesitated for a moment, her breath shallow, before following him. The alley was dark, and the only light came from a flickering street lamp at the far end. It felt like a trap, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. When she rounded the corner, she saw him waiting, as though he knew she would follow. Amara, he said again, his voice calm but firm. She stopped, her back straightening. How do you know my name? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. I think you already know the answer. Amara swallowed hard, trying to hide the fear that was creeping up on her. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want with me. His gaze softened, just for a moment. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you. But you need to understand something first. Amara took a cautious step back, her mind racing. Help me? Why would you want to help me? The man sighed, as if preparing himself for something difficult. You have no idea who you are, do you? She frowned, confused. What do you mean? His eyes locked onto hers. You're not just anyone. You're not just a girl who happened to be at the park. You have a history, Amara. A past you don't even remember. And I need you to trust me when I say that you're far more important than you realize. Her world tilted. She felt her legs weaken beneath her, her head spinning. What are you talking about? I know this is hard to believe, but everything you've known about yourself, everything you've lived through, it's been carefully constructed. Your life wasn't an accident. It was planned. Amara shook her head, struggling to take in his words. No. You're lying. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, silver locket, and held it out to her. Amara's eyes widened as she recognized it. The locket was identical to one her mother had worn. It was the only thing her mother had left behind when she disappeared. Her breath caught in her throat. I didn't want you to find out like this, the man said softly. But it's time you knew the truth. Your mother didn't disappear, Amara. She was taken. Amara stood frozen in the dim alley, her breath quick and shallow, her fingers trembling as she reached for the locket in the man's hand. The cool metal felt familiar, its weight heavy with memories she couldn't quite grasp. It was the same locket her mother had worn, the one she had clutched to her chest in the only photograph Amara had of her. But that was impossible. Her mother had vanished years ago, leaving nothing but emptiness and unanswered questions. I don't understand, Amara whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. How do you have this? My mother, she disappeared. She left me. I don't. Your mother didn't leave you, Amara. The man interrupted, his voice calm but firm. She was taken. And so were you. Her mind spun in 1,000 directions, each one more terrifying than the last. Taken? Taken by who? And why would anyone take her, too? She had spent years growing up in foster homes, always feeling like an outsider, never truly knowing her place in the world. But this was something else entirely. The man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I know this is hard to believe. But your life, everything you thought you knew, was carefully constructed. You were never meant to live the way you have. Amara shook her head, backing away, her mind reeling. I don't, this is insane. You're telling me that my whole life was a lie? That I've been living a fake life? Her voice cracked as the weight of his words hit her like a freight train. The man sighed, looking both regretful and resolute. Yes. But the truth is far more complicated than that. Your mother, she was part of something far bigger than you could ever imagine. And so were you. This wasn't an accident. It was planned. You were chosen. Chosen? Amara felt like the ground beneath her was crumbling. Chosen for what? What does that even mean? The man hesitated, as though weighing how much to reveal. Amara, you are part of something that's been in the making for years. Your mother was involved with a group of people who believed in the possibility of human evolution. Not just physical evolution, but mental, emotional, even spiritual. They were searching for individuals like you, people who had the potential for something extraordinary. And your mother, she thought you could be the one. Wait, Amara interrupted, her mind reeling with the implications. Are you telling me my mother was some kind of scientist or? No, he cut in sharply. She was part of something much deeper. A secret society, if you will. But it wasn't just about science or research. It was about control. Power. They believed that if they could harness the potential of certain individuals, they could shape the future of humanity. Amara's mind whirled. She felt like she was on the edge of something she couldn't see, something so vast and dangerous that it threatened to swallow her whole. And you? Who are you in all of this? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at the locket, his fingers tracing the edges with a sense of reverence. I was someone who was meant to watch over you. To protect you. But when your mother vanished, everything changed. I lost track of you. Until today. Today? Amara's heart raced. You've been watching me this whole time? I had to, he replied simply. You've been in danger from the moment you were born. The people your mother was involved with, they've been hunting for you. And now, they know you're alive. Amara felt a cold chill creep up her spine. Hunting for me? Why me? The man didn't immediately respond. Instead, he looked around them, his eyes scanning the dark alley, as if expecting someone to jump out at them at any moment. Then, with a sharp exhale, he met her gaze again. Because you're the key. You hold the answers to everything they've been looking for. They believe you're the one who can unlock the next step in human evolution. Amara's mind was on fire, her thoughts tangling in confusion. You're saying that these people, whoever they are, want me because I'm some kind of, what? Superhuman? The man's lips tightened, and for a brief moment, he looked like he might say something else. But then, he nodded slowly. In a way, yes. But it's more complicated than that. They want you for what you can become. They want to control you. But I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. Her hands were clammy as she clutched the locket tightly, still trying to absorb the weight of everything he was telling her. And you think you can stop them? How do you even know they're still out there? I know because they found you once, he said quietly. And they will find you again. It's only a matter of time. Amara swallowed hard, her mind racing with the possibilities. So, what now? What do I do? How do I escape these people? How do I protect myself? The man took a deep breath, his expression softening for the first time. You need to come with me. I've been trying to track down the remnants of your mother's group. They've scattered, but they're still a threat. You can't stay here. Not anymore. Amara felt a surge of panic rise within her. What are you talking about? I can't just leave everything behind. I've been running my whole life, hiding from who knows what, and now you want me to just leave everything I've known behind? Her voice cracked with emotion as she continued, I don't even know who I am anymore. You're telling me that my whole life has been a lie. That I've been a part of something I didn't even ask for. And now you want me to just run? To give up what little stability I have left? The man's face softened, his gaze sympathetic. I understand that this is hard. But you don't have a choice. They will come for you. And when they do, you need to be ready. You need to understand the truth about who you are, what you're capable of. Only then can you fight back. Amara took a step back, still reeling. And how do you expect me to trust you? You've shown up out of nowhere with a locket and all these secrets. You want me to just believe you? The man looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of urgency and regret. I know it's a lot. I know it doesn't make sense. But the only way to truly protect yourself, and everyone else, is to face the truth. And I can help you do that. But only if you trust me. Amara felt torn, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She had spent her whole life trying to survive, trying to make sense of the pieces that didn't fit. And now, here was a man telling her that her entire existence had been manipulated, controlled. That she was more than just a girl trying to get by. That she was part of something bigger than she could possibly understand. Give me one reason why I should trust you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't hesitate. Because your life, Amara, is the key to everything. And if you don't trust me, you may not make it out alive. Amara closed her eyes for a moment, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she knew she had to make. There was no going back now. No matter how much she wished for a different life, the truth was out there, and it was coming for her. "I'll go with you," she said finally, her voice steady but resolute. "But I need to know everything. I need the truth." The man nodded, a small flicker of relief crossing his face. "You'll get it. But first, we need to move quickly. The clock is ticking." As they disappeared into the shadows, the world around Amara seemed to shift, her past, her future, and everything she thought she knew about herself unraveling with each step. The truth was closer than ever, but it was also more dangerous than she could imagine. Amara's heart raced as she followed the man through the winding streets. The world around her seemed to blur, everything moving too quickly, too fast for her to keep up. It was as if she were caught in a storm, an overwhelming force that kept pulling her deeper into an unknown world, a world she didn't ask for and wasn't sure she wanted. Yet, there she was, stumbling forward, one step at a time, with only the locket in her hand and the man's cryptic words echoing in her mind. They didn't speak as they walked. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words and buried truths. Amara wanted to ask more questions, demand answers to everything he had told her, but something in his demeanor made her hold back. There was an urgency in the way he moved, a tension in his shoulders that spoke volumes, as though the world were about to implode at any moment. They reached a small, inconspicuous building at the edge of town, its windows covered with thick curtains, its door locked with a heavy, rusted bolt. The man stopped in front of it, glancing at Amara. She could see the seriousness in his eyes, the weight of something much larger than both of them hanging in the air. "We're safe here," he said, his voice low. "For now." Amara looked at the door, then back at him. "Safe from what? Who's coming?" He didn't answer right away, instead reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a set of keys. He unlocked the door with a quiet click, then stepped inside. The air in the room was stale, the faint smell of dust and old wood filling her nostrils. The man gestured for her to enter, and after a brief hesitation, she did. The room was sparse, with only a few pieces of furniture scattered around. A small table in the corner, some mismatched chairs, and a narrow bed in the far corner. The walls were bare, save for a few maps and photographs pinned to the boards. There was no warmth, no comfort here. It felt like a place meant for planning, for strategizing, not for living. Amara's eyes landed on a photograph on the wall. It was a picture of a group of people, familiar faces, but faces she couldn't quite place. Among them was a woman she recognized instantly, her mother. Her heart skipped a beat as she stepped closer to the photo, her fingers brushing against the edges of the frame. "You said my mother was part of something," she said, her voice trembling. "What is this?" The man followed her gaze, his face hardening. "That's the group I told you about. The people who've been after you. Your mother was one of them, and so were you. But things went wrong. Very wrong." Amara turned to face him, her eyes searching his face for answers. "What went wrong? What happened?" The man sighed, rubbing his forehead. The group wasn't just about human evolution. It wasn't just some scientific project or secret society. They had a much darker goal. They wanted control. They believed that if they could unlock certain powers within individuals, people like you, they could control the future of humanity. Amara felt a chill run down her spine. Powers? Like, what? What kind of powers? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the table and grabbed a thick folder. He opened it, revealing a series of documents, photographs, and notes. They believed in the possibility of manipulating human biology, enhancing certain abilities. And your mother, she was a key player in their experiments. They thought you were the next step. But before they could fully manipulate you, she vanished. Amara took a step forward, her gaze glued to the folder. You keep saying my mother vanished. What does that even mean? Was she murdered? Was she taken? The man's eyes flickered with something like guilt. I don't know exactly what happened to her. But I believe they took her. The group had agents, people who would do whatever it took to bring in the test subjects. Your mother tried to protect you, but in the end, she failed. Amara's chest tightened. Failed? You mean, she tried to protect me from this experiment? From the moment you were born, Amara, you were part of their plan. Your mother thought she could protect you by hiding you away. But it didn't work. And now they know you're alive. They're coming for you. A wave of panic surged through Amara. What do you mean, coming for me? I don't even know who these people are. Why do they want me? The man's face hardened. They want you because you hold the key to everything. Your mother was part of a secret project, a project that could change the course of humanity. They believe you're the final piece they need. Amara shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. But what does that even mean? What's so special about me? I'm just a regular girl. I don't have anything to offer anyone. The man's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't understand. You've always been special, Amara. You just don't know it yet. But if we don't act quickly, it'll be too late. Before Amara could respond, a loud banging noise erupted from the door. Her heart skipped a beat as the sound grew louder, more insistent. Someone was trying to break in. The man cursed under his breath. They found us. We need to move, now. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the room. Come on, we don't have much time. Amara stumbled behind him as they rushed through a narrow hallway and into a small closet. The man yanked open a trapdoor in the floor and motioned for her to go down first. This way. It's our only chance. Amara's mind raced as she climbed down into the darkness. She had no idea where they were going or what was waiting for them, but she knew one thing: there was no turning back now. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and the man lit a small flashlight. The beam of light cut through the thick darkness, revealing a narrow tunnel stretching out in front of them. We have to get to the safe house, he said, his voice urgent. It's the only place we can go where they won't find us. Amara nodded, her mind still reeling with the weight of everything he had told her. But she had no choice. The danger was real. And the only way to survive was to keep moving, to trust the man who had become her only lifeline. As they moved through the tunnel, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That someone, something, was waiting for them in the darkness, ready to strike. But she pushed the thought aside. There was no time for fear. Ahead, the man stopped abruptly, his body tense. Someone's coming. Amara's pulse quickened as she heard the sound of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, echoing down the tunnel toward them. Go, the man whispered, his voice low and intense. Get to the safe house. I'll handle this. Amara hesitated, but only for a moment. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest as she sprinted down the tunnel, her breath coming in short gasps. She couldn't look back. She couldn't stop. Not until she was safe. Amara's feet pounded the cold, damp tunnel floor as she sprinted through the narrow passageway. Her chest ached from the effort, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she didn't dare slow down. She could still hear the sound of footsteps behind her, drawing closer, closer with every second. The man had told her to run, to get to the safe house, but she didn't know if she could make it alone. She didn't even know where she was going. The tunnel twisted ahead, dark and unyielding, its walls closing in around her like a trap. Her pulse raced as her mind screamed at her to find the exit, but the way forward was a blur, shadows stretching. out before her like claws reaching to pull her in. She glanced over her shoulder, and that was when she saw it, a figure, tall and menacing, moving swiftly toward her. The flashlight she carried flickered weakly, casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. The figure wasn't far behind, and the rapid footsteps echoed louder and louder in the confined space, each thud reverberating through her entire body. Amara's heart skipped a beat. The man had said they were coming, but she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected them to find her so soon. Her feet faltered, but she pushed herself harder, faster. The sound of her pursuer grew louder, more insistent. The end of the tunnel had to be close. She couldn't stop now. She had to keep going. She had to survive. Then, the ground beneath her feet shifted. She stumbled, her ankle twisting as she fell to the floor with a sharp cry. The pain shot up her leg, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to give in to it. Panic flooded her senses. Her head spun. The footsteps grew closer. She couldn't let them catch her, not now, not when she was so close. With all the strength she had left, she pushed herself back up, ignoring the pain in her leg. But as she moved, she realized something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. The footsteps had stopped. A terrible silence filled the tunnel, oppressive and heavy. Amara froze, her eyes darting around the darkness, trying to make out any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Just the sound of her own breathing, harsh and ragged in the stillness. She strained her ears, listening for any hint of the approaching figure. Nothing. Then, just as suddenly as it had gone silent, a voice echoed from the darkness. "You're not going to make it." Amara's breath caught in her throat. The voice was low, cold, with a cruel edge to it. It came from everywhere, reverberating through the walls, vibrating in her chest. She could hear the footsteps now, slow and deliberate, each one sending a jolt of fear through her. It wasn't one person anymore. It was more. "Who are you?" Amara demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound strong. She couldn't let them see her fear. There was a pause, and then the voice responded with a laugh, dark, mocking, and chilling. "Who we are is not important. What's important is that you understand that you're running out of time. There's nowhere to hide." Amara's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the eyes of her pursuers on her now, even if she couldn't see them. She had no idea who they were or why they were after her, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going to let them catch her. Not without a fight. She gripped the flashlight tightly, her knuckles white with the effort. The dark tunnel was closing in on her, every step making her feel smaller, more insignificant. But she refused to back down. She wasn't going to be their prey. She wasn't going to be their victim. The voice returned. "Closer now. You're not special, Amara. You're nothing but a pawn in a much larger game. The sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll understand why you won't make it out of here alive." Amara's pulse quickened, panic flooding her veins. What did they want with her? Why was she so important to them? What game was she caught in? A movement in the corner of her vision made her spin around. The light from the flashlight swept over a figure emerging from the shadows. It was tall, dressed in black from head to toe, its face hidden beneath a mask. The figure was unnaturally still, almost mechanical, like a predator that had all the time in the world. Amara's heart pounded in her chest as she backed away, her mind racing. She had to think. She couldn't let them capture her. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. Suddenly, the man's voice rang through her mind. "Trust no one." The words replayed over and over again, like a mantra, urging her to be wary. But the question still lingered: who could she trust? And what was she running from? Before she could gather her thoughts, the figure lunged forward, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Amara's survival instincts kicked in. She ducked and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the figure's grasp. The tunnel was too narrow to fight back effectively, but she couldn't afford to give up. She scrambled to her feet, running faster than ever, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. But the sound of pursuit was relentless. The footsteps, the voices, they were all closing in on her. Then, as if by miracle, a door appeared ahead of her, hidden in the wall of the tunnel, barely visible in the dim light. It was small, old, but it was an escape. It had to be. Amara didn't hesitate. She darted toward it, her fingers fumbling for the handle. Her heart raced as the door creaked open, the sound echoing in the tunnel. Without looking back, she rushed through the doorway, slamming it shut behind her. The darkness inside the room was thick, suffocating. The air was still, as if the room had been untouched for years. Amara's pulse hammered in her ears as she pressed her back against the door, trying to calm her breath. She strained her ears, listening for any sign that her pursuers were following. But there was only silence. For a moment, Amara allowed herself to breathe, her mind swirling with fear and confusion. She had no idea where she was, how she had escaped, or what was waiting for her on the other side of that door. But she knew one thing: she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let the truth slip away. The man had been right. They were coming for her, and she had to be ready to face whatever came next. Her eyes scanned the room, and that's when she saw it. A large, wooden chest sat against the far wall, its lid slightly ajar. Amara stepped toward it, her fingers trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of old documents. Files, and photographs, all neatly arranged. The sight of them made her stomach tighten. She didn't know what she was about to uncover, but she had to know. She had to find the truth. She reached into the chest, pulling out the first file she could grab. As she flipped it open, a name jumped out at her. Amara Reed. Her blood ran cold. It was her name. But the photo next to it, a younger version of herself, didn't belong to her. It wasn't her mother either. The person in the photo was someone she had never seen before. But they looked familiar. A sudden realization hit her like a lightning bolt. It wasn't just about her mother. It was about her whole life. The truth she had been searching for all along was about to unfold, and she was finally ready to face it. Amara's hands shook as she held the file in her lap. The photograph of the woman she didn't recognize haunted her, pulling at the very fabric of her understanding. Who was she? And why was her photo in a file about Amara Reed? There were no answers in the file. No explanations. Only more questions. She closed the file slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. The room around her felt as though it were closing in. The walls seemed to press in on her, the air thick with tension. She had been running for so long. Running from something she couldn't even begin to understand. But now, in this dimly lit room, she was closer than ever to the truth. She could feel it in her bones. But how much truth could she handle? Amara placed the file back in the chest and, for a moment, allowed herself to breathe. The room was still, the silence deafening. But that quiet felt like the calm before the storm. She could feel the weight of the moment settling around her, a sense of inevitability hanging in the air. Her thoughts swirled as she replayed everything she had learned so far. The strange men in the tunnels. The cryptic messages. The whispers that followed her every step. They were all pieces of a puzzle that seemed to have no solution. But now, with this file in her hands, the pieces were beginning to fit together. Slowly, painfully, the truth was revealing itself. Amara stood up, her body stiff with the effort. She walked across the room, her gaze scanning the dark corners. The chest was the only thing in the room that seemed to hold any answers. But as she reached for it again, a sudden noise from behind her made her freeze. A door creaked open. Her heart skipped a beat. She spun around, eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. There, standing in the doorway, was a figure. Tall, imposing, dressed in black. The very same man who had warned her earlier, the one who had told her to run. But there was something different about him now. His posture was relaxed, almost too relaxed, as though he knew something she didn't. His eyes locked onto hers with a knowing look, one that sent a chill down her spine. "Why didn't you leave when you had the chance?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Amara's mind raced, but she didn't let her fear show. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaky but strong. "What do you want from me?" The man stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He didn't answer her question right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out another file, similar to the one she had just found. He walked toward her, his movements deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "I think you've been looking for this," he said, holding out the file. Amara's fingers trembled as she took the file from his hand. Her eyes scanned the front, her stomach twisting in anticipation. Her name was there again, but this time, there was something else. A stamp. A mark. A symbol she didn't recognize. "Open it," the man said softly. "You're about to learn the truth." Amara didn't hesitate. She opened the file, and as she flipped through the pages, everything she thought she knew about her life started to unravel. There were documents detailing her birth, her real birth, not the one she had been told. She wasn't born in the city she had grown up in. She wasn't even born in the country. The files contained a trail of names, dates, and places, but one thing stood out, a name that had been erased, crossed out, replaced by another. Her mother's name was different. And the father listed on the papers wasn't who she thought he was. The pages went on, each one revealing more secrets, more lies. But the most shocking discovery came on the final page. The woman in the photograph, the woman whose name had haunted her dreams, was her biological mother. Amara's world tilted on its axis. She staggered back, her hand pressing against the wall for support. She couldn't breathe. The words on the page seemed to blur, their meaning lost in a fog of disbelief. "I know this is a lot to take in," the man said, his voice low and almost sympathetic. "But you need to understand the truth. Your mother, she wasn't just a woman. She was part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine. And so are you." Amara's mind reeled. "What do you mean? What is this? What's happening?" The man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've been looking for answers your entire life. Now you have them. You are the key to everything." Her heart hammered in her chest. "The key to what? What do you want from me?" The man took a deep breath, his gaze softening for the first time. "You were chosen, Amara. From the moment you were born, you were chosen to play a role in a much larger game. A game that's been unfolding for generations. And now, it's your turn." Amara shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't understand. I'm just a girl. What could I possibly have to do with any of this?" He placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but not unkind. "You are much more than that. You are the result of a legacy, one that's been hidden from you, one that's been kept secret for a reason. Your mother, she didn't want you to know. She wanted you to be safe. But why? Why keep it a secret? Why didn't she just tell me?" "Because the world isn't ready for the truth," the man said softly. "And neither were you." Amara stared at him, her mind trying to process everything he was saying. She had spent so much of her life searching for answers. But now that she had them, they only raised more questions. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "What is all of this?" The man didn't answer right away. He seemed to consider her question carefully before speaking again. I'm someone who has been waiting for you to understand. Someone who's been watching over you, guiding you, even when you didn't know it. And now, it's time for you to make a choice. Amara's mind raced. What choice? What could she possibly choose? Her entire life had been a lie, and now, she was expected to choose something she couldn't even comprehend. But before she could ask another question, the man spoke again. The choice is yours. You can walk away. You can leave this room, forget everything you've learned, and go back to your old life. Or, he paused, his eyes intense, you can stay, and you can be part of something much bigger than you ever imagined. Amara's heart pounded in her chest. The decision weighed on her like 1,000 pounds, and she didn't know what to do. Could she really walk away from everything she had just uncovered? Could she forget about the truth, the secrets, the game? The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Then, in a moment of clarity, Amara made her decision. I'm not walking away, she said, her voice strong, her fear gone. I want to know the truth. I want to know who I really am. The man nodded, as if he had been expecting her answer. Then you're ready. And with those words, Amara's life changed forever.